They haven't used them.
Maybe we need to talk to Public Works about that. We got new lights, but we can't get any chairs.
Lights are cheap.
I mean, do we have a
They put
certain timeframe that we have?
they put new ones in these cans. Probably, yeah. And they appear to be LEDs. Looking into them, they're kind of bright.
Cinda, do you need a motion on number 2?
Oh, I would assume. Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
It says
I'm not used to having to do that on a in-depth.
Doo-doo-doo-doo.
Oh.
He was trying to get out of there.
Oh, because that meeting.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the February 8th Muscatine City Council meeting. I don't know why I have 9th on my mind. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Cinda, would you please do the call?
Council
Roll
members
call.
Spread,
Present.
Harvey,
Present.
Brockert,
Present.
Salcedo,
Present.
Brackett,
Present.
Fitzgerald,
Present.
Malcolm.
Present.
7 present, 0 absent, Your Honor.
Thank you, Cinda. We are on number 2 on tonight's agenda. This is our in-depth meeting, so we will work our way right through it. Do I have a motion to approve a request for the high-strength waste supplemental agreement number 3?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
So any discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion by Councilman Fitzgerald with a second by Councilman Spread. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries with all ayes and the request is approved. Number 3 on tonight's agenda, we have Shelley Meharry here, who's going to talk to us about the Muscatine China Initiative Committee and the symphony coming up.
Hi.
Hi.
Good evening. I brought my friend Ann Olson along with me. I didn't have very much time to review my notes because the agenda is moving very quickly tonight, which is not a bad thing. We are really pleased. I am, again, Shelley Meharry. I'm a member of the Muscatine China Initiatives Committee, and our charge is to foster friendship and exchange and business development between Muscatine, Iowa, and opportunities in China. And so we are very pleased to welcome the Zhejiang Symphony, who will be coming to Muscatine on Wednesday, February 21st. And so this is actually the 3rd time that a Chinese symphony has come to Muscatine. So these symphonies are arranged in China, and they actually come to the United States over the Chinese New Year. And so they are giving 2 paid performances, one in Chicago and one in Detroit. And then they get on their bus and they ride 8 hours, 9 hours to Muscatine to give a free concert to us. So why on earth would they want to do this? And remember, this is professional musicians, professional symphonies, players, and so we think it's because of the friendship and hospitality that we are able to give to our friends from China here in Muscatine. So in addition to the members of the orchestra coming to Muscatine, and we have some orchestrated things that they do, each performing member of the orchestra is placed with a Muscatine family to have a homestay. And so we have found through this experience that for these individuals, it is really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that they come into an American home and stay and learn about how your family lives and what you eat and what your day looks like. And so it's a very exciting opportunity for us. While they are here in Muscatine, they experience some tours. So the visitors will be going to the Friendship House. I have a list, actually. They'll be visiting the Friendship House, our library, They'll be coming to City Hall, which I know, Diana, you are familiar with them coming. They're very excited to see how our local government works and the area in which that takes place. They'll also be having a lunch at the History and Industry Center, and then a highlight is seeing the Mississippi River and taking photographs of that. So in the past, we have also arranged for the orchestra to go into the high school and share a chorus experience or another musical experience with the students there, which has been really fun. So the Muscatine China Initiatives Committee, really, it's a team effort to pull this off. You know, this is definitely a professional orchestra who comes, but we really rely on volunteers here to pull it all together. So from the homestays to the translation services that are taking place, the concert setup and procuring of instruments, and that's really why I brought Anne along here. Anne, why don't you share a little bit about your role in your symphony role in getting the instruments?
Actually, I work with Carolyn Arola, who has single-handedly masterminded this for the last 2 concerts, and I'm helping this year. We have to go to Iowa City and rent some Chinese instruments. We will borrow instruments from MCC, some from the high school, some from our symphony, and it's a lot of grunt work and organization.
So without their leadership and understanding of what everything was needed, we certainly couldn't pull off an event like this. Also planning of the tour and the meals that are happening, and then all of the concert logistics. Again, we're volunteer based, so from the programs to how we're going to have parking, everything is run volunteer based. So special thank yous that we'd like to share with council. So if you have an opportunity to thank these groups as well. The Muscatine Symphony Orchestra always jumps in and tries to help out in any way they can. Monsanto has been a special sponsor for us in sponsoring lunch events that we'll be having with our visitors. The Muscatine History and Industry Center will also be hosting a lunch for us. The Muscatine Community School District is helping with risers. They're also providing, the West Middle School Orchestra students will be coming and performing, the orchestra students will be playing for the symphony during lunch, and they love that. They love to see the students involved in music. And again, these host families. So you can imagine if you're a volunteer being a host family for the first time. You're getting a guest who doesn't speak English and doesn't really know how everything's going to go. So the committee really works together to share cultural norm information, what to expect, the timeline, how things will flow. And the first time we did it, you know, we kind of cobbled it together and thought, you know, friendship and music are universal languages, and so it worked, and it's just kept going. The Chinese orchestras have requested to come back to visit us again in the future. And so just to single out a few people who have been so helpful in this are Dan Stein and Jerry Hutchings. Dan Stein is the chairperson of the Muscatine China Initiatives Committee. Also, Janet Clark and Christine Conlin have coordinated our homestay experiences. Anne is here with me as well, and she mentioned Carolyn Arola and Dick Sessler of the Muscatine Symphony Orchestra. Again, that Muscatine China Initiatives Committee and many other volunteers. So what this experience has created is really international friendships. So my family has hosted guests in our home each time that the symphony has come, and our family still WeChats with the individuals who came to our home, and they send Happy New Year messages, and know when we have a holiday, they send a message. So it's been a really meaningful experience for our family as well as many others here. And so we hope that you will all join us on Wednesday, February 21st at 7 p.m. at Central Auditorium for a free, amazing concert. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Shelley?
Yeah.
Are they in town 1 or 2 nights?
So thank you for asking that question. So they will arrive on Tuesday evening, the 20th. The group comes together at China Garden. We have a meal, and then the orchestra members go home with their homestay families. They will have breakfast with the homestay families, and then the homestay family will deliver them to the Friendship House. For the rest of the day, they tour. So this would be Wednesday. So they tour the city on Wednesday. And then about 2 p.m., they will go to Central Middle School and then stay there until performance time. They rehearse prior. So they're at Central for a number of hours getting ready for our performance. Then at the end of the evening, there's a little wrap-up party for host families and the orchestra. Everyone goes back to homestays, and then we get back up at 4 a.m. to deliver them to their tour bus. So it's a very quick visit. But again, I just think it speaks so highly of the heart of Muscatine and the people who are here, that we share our community and share our homes with others. So it's been a great experience.
And why do they not have instruments? That we have to go rent the instruments?
They do have instruments, but there are instruments they can't travel with.
Okay.
Some specialty drums, a gong, for instance, they aren't going to travel with that.
Okay, well,
A couple of string basses, yeah, so we have to rent those for
can't
them.
imagine, I was just trying to, a professional person leaving his instrument that he uses 900% of the time, and he's leaving it alone.
That's a great
And
question.
borrowing one from
Right,
someone.
that's a great question too. Most of the individual performers will have their own instrument, but like the percussion section could play many different instruments, and so they don't have everything.
Right,
And
okay.
so that's where Anne and her expertise comes in.
Shelley,
Great.
so again, thank you for all the work you guys are doing. Is the actual orchestra group the same orchestra group that came last time?
It's different. It's different. They are coming from different provinces in China. Again, the orchestras that are really coming over for the Chinese New Year, doing these paid performances in Chicago and Detroit. So they're changing every year. They're from different provinces. So if you remember last year's performance, it was really more traditional Chinese music, while this year's group will be more symphony, like a true symphony. There were really unique instruments last year, some that we had never seen or heard of before. So it is different. It's a different group from a different area of the country. But the Chinese government actually, helps coordinate getting the tour groups over. And so because that core group of the planners knows about us, they tell the other groups, and then the other groups say, I want to go to Muscatine. So that's kind of how it started.
Fantastic.
Great.
Very special. Thank you so much
Thank
for all
you.
your hard work. We're
Thank
looking
you.
forward to it.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you too, Ann. Now we're going to have Brian, our Public Works Director, talk about Roundabout.
Good evening. Everyone's favorite topic is up next. Just per our last conversation that we had, council had asked for some more information and information that I didn't have at the time. So we have, I've brought a representative from Shive Hattery. I'm going to let him do most of the talking. Just as some ground rules, I guess you'd say, this is just information sharing at this point tonight. We're not requesting any action from council at this point. If you'd like to direct us to do something different after you hear what we have to say tonight, we could certainly do that. Otherwise, at some point, I will bring back a resolution or a recommendation for you to vote on how to proceed. So just as a brief recap from last time, the reason that we are bringing this forward to you is as Public Works receives multiple complaints, calls, comments throughout the year of the traffic problems that we have at the Hauser and Fulham intersection. So taking those into consideration, we've sought a potential solution. This is one of the solutions that we found. This one, writing the grant for the Transportation Safety Improvement Grant, it was awarded, hasn't been awarded yet, but it has been approved, and it would be fully funded for construction of the project. Shive Hattery assisted us with writing the grant, and will, if council chooses to move forward, do the design, and then we would oversee the construction and build the thing. So you had several questions before. Greg Shopveld with Shive Hattery is here to hopefully answer those. If there's anything he doesn't know, I'll step in, but I'm going to cede the floor to him and let him go, unless you have any questions for me right now. Awesome. Here we go.
That was quick.
Dodging.
Yeah. Good plans, Dan.
Thanks for having me here. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm Muscatine born and raised, and I think this is the first time I've ever actually stepped foot in this room. So kind of love the panorama here. That said, I know I'm the last on the agenda, so I'll be as brief as I can. Stop me any time along the way if you've got a question. I'll be perfectly clear. I'm not here to sell you on a mini roundabout on this mini roundabout. If it comes across that way, please don't take it that way. I'm a big fan. I'm not ashamed to admit that. But I recognize that there's a right way to do it and a right place to put them. And just because a particular intersection meets that criteria that it could work, doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be a mini roundabout. And it's certainly never the only option. So to be perfectly clear, there's great things about mini roundabouts, and there's great places to put them. But this is not your only option at Hauser and Foyum. Here we go. So I know you saw the schematic drawing that we'd included in the application, and that was pretty simplistic, and it was from the top down, so not an easy way to know what we're looking at. So I want to talk about what it's not. What it is not is a traffic circle, and if you can see this, a traffic circle is literally a circle of pavement in the middle of an intersection. It's a big curbed island. You put a big mound of dirt in there, and you fill it with landscaping and trees. And the whole point of a traffic circle is to scare people into slowing them down. You see a tree in front of you, you instinctively slow down. They're great in residential neighborhoods where you have low traffic, speeding cars, and no trucks. But it would be a horrible solution on any of your thoroughfares because you have trucks, or every once in a while you do. You need to be able to accommodate that. So this is not a mini roundabout, not what we would put at Foyum and Hauser. It's not a full roundabout either. You obviously have one at Logan and Cedar. You know what that looks like. Here's one in Mount Vernon we did. It's big, and it's designed to take a lot of truck traffic and to move a lot of cars quickly. They're great things, but they take up a lot of right-of-way. You don't have that right-of-way at Foyum and Hauser, and there's no way to get it. You also don't need it. You don't have that volume of traffic. Here's a comparison then to get a handle between what a mini roundabout is versus a modern or a full roundabout. Obviously, it's much smaller, so a mini roundabout anywhere from 45 to 90. The one we show at Foyum and Hauser is about 70, so in the middle. Whereas a modern roundabout is 100 to 280, much larger. The capacity is the big difference between what a mini does versus what a modern roundabout does. So we say the capacity of a mini roundabout is about 15,000 cars a day, whereas a full roundabout, 25 to 45,000. The difference, besides size, is how you move through a mini roundabout. With a full-size roundabout, you can get a full-size semi all the way around the circle, keep it in its lane, just like you would through any other intersection. That's not the case in a mini roundabout. If you imagine a full-size semi going through Foyum and Hauser right now and trying to turn left or right, it's problematic. Mini doesn't change that. That's why you don't want to put a mini in an area with very high traffic or high truck traffic, because it's not designed to accommodate that. That said, you still have to, it's not designed to make that a really efficient. It doesn't change it, but it is designed to accommodate it in the sense that that center island, that circle, is completely mountable. It's a 3-inch curb, and it's not a straight up curb like you would see on the side of a street. It's mountable. Quite honestly, any passenger vehicle could go over it if they wanted to. It's just not convenient. But if you had a full-size 53-foot semi-trailer that needed to go straight or through it, you can fully expect them to go over it. School buses, regular passenger vehicles, they can go around the circle. And if you ever saw a video that I think we had provided to Brian at some point that showed a mini in Coralville, once you get a full-size city bus, that's also a little bit bigger than what you would drive around that circle, so it'll go right over it. The beauty of it being small, though, is that it's less expensive and quicker to build than a full-size roundabout. So $150,000 versus $1.5 million, and a couple months or a month maybe to build it. So this is what we showed at Foyum and Hauser. Hard to tell from this perspective maybe, but the whole intent of a mini roundabout is, if you know where the sidewalks are there today, Those sidewalks don't move out any further, because that's essentially the property line. We are not trying to push this intersection or those sidewalks further into somebody's property, because you don't want to acquire a right-of-way, they probably don't want to give it to you, you don't need it. So it literally fits within the confines of your current right-of-way. You just widen out the intersection corners a little bit, and you build that center traversable island. The red islands on any side of that center intersection are really simply designed to start slowing people down and getting them pointed in the right direction. And the reason why we split that, why there's 2 islands on each street, is because that's where you would have a pedestrian crossing. What you don't want to do in a roundabout is try to push pedestrians into the middle of it, because there's a circle of cars there. You really want to get them back to the point where there's really only a typical look left, look right, and cross. So that's what that cut in the island is truly a pedestrian pathway.
Can you make that larger? Or Brian, make that larger?
There you go.
He's an engineer, he can do that.
No.
Now, that's
Where's-
not showing utility pole.
Right, right.
Because on the 2 corners on the right-hand side, there's a utility poles really near the intersection.
Yep, so there is,
Okay. Oh, okay.
yep, and on the east side of Hauser, you have those high line, high voltage lines. We don't want to move them. Power and Water probably doesn't want us to try to make them move them either. So this pole,
Imagine, yeah.
that one where the cursor's sitting, that is one of those high voltage, goes all the way up.
The
This-
other one is lower.
This one is a low voltage drop that runs east down Fulham. Might need to shift a little bit, not sure yet, but much more easy to accommodate
They're
than
both
trying to
really
move.
close to the intersection is the only thing I was looking at.
Yeah, and we'd like them to be 5-6 feet away. Yep.
Yeah, probably not doing it.
Are those islands mountable, or are they not?
Yep,
They
yep.
are.
Same thing, that 3-inch slope. So from a snow plowing standpoint, they won't even notice it. And they're pretty narrow, 4 or 5 feet narrow. So they won't end up being a place to store snow. I mean, you couldn't do it if you tried. So it'll end up being a clear intersection, much the way it is today during a snowstorm.
So the sidewalks will stay right where they're at,
They stay right where they're at, yep.
but the orange right-of-way area goes right up to the sidewalk?
Yeah, we end up paving, and that's maybe schematic in nature. It might not be that full width. What we definitely end up doing is usually paving this area. Because it's so narrow, you won't get grass to grow anyways. It burns out in the summer. It's also an opportunity to increase that semi-turning radius ability. And then, you know, it almost becomes personal preference. Do you want to try to grow grass in this area? And
I was just
these
thinking
little-
you wouldn't want a semi going that close to the sidewalk.
No, that's not the intent, is to bring semis closer to people. It's really a logistics, can we get grass to grow there?
What kinds of allowances are you making for the 2 driveways that are really close to where that's proposed to go in?
Sure. Let's see how easily I can. So we obviously have
You have
the
2.
one on the north side of Fulham and one south side of Fulham. And they're very close to that intersection. In a perfect world, we wouldn't have them that close, even in its current 2-way stop. It's difficult, I'm sure, for them during those peak times to get in and out.
Right.
And we're obviously putting that island perfectly in line with either of them. In a perfect world, we would suggest that they should operate as a right in, right out only. In terms of they approach their driveway from the right, and that's the only way they ever come in, as opposed to trying to turn left, and they leave it to the right. That's not a requirement by any means. I can't enforce that even if I wanted to. The only challenge that we're adding to them is that they would have that 3-inch mountable curb. If they back out of their driveway across Hauser now, they would be doing it up and over a 3-inch curb as well.
Does it have to be a 3-inch mountable curb, or could you do a surface color?
It could be. Yep, it doesn't have to be raised. The only benefit to adding raised and colored and anything you can do to make it stand out better in dark, wet conditions. Because if you ever drive down a street when it's dark and wet, you really lose paint markings unless they're highly reflective. So if we can raise it and use colored concrete, that stands out better. If we don't want to raise it, you can still use colored concrete, that stands out, and we can paint it. So it's really, there's no requirement hard and fast that it must be a raised island. But the center island, we would certainly suggest keep it as a raised island. We don't want to encourage people to drive over that.
I'm a little confused. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm a slow learner here. But Kelsey and Nadine and I took a tour of the area, and we walked this area. And one of the driveways has a 2.5 car garage and a double driveway. And across the street, exactly across from them, they have a single driveway. So if you come, excuse me a second.
Sure.
We saw these power lines, but right here, this person had a single driveway. The only way they would be able to go in is this way, but they also gonna have to bag out this way. This person has a double driveway, and the only way he or she could go in is coming in this way and bagging out this way. And I'm not sure, your picture doesn't represent that.
No, I think you're looking at I think it's,
One of the,
look at it, yeah, Hauser's straight up and down on that.
Okay, okay.
and the one on the bottom right or left-hand side is a single-car garage on it.
Yeah,
The other
then
one
the
above
other
that
one-
doesn't have a garage.
More problematic is they can go in this way, but then they gotta come out in the traffic. So I'm like, I got lost with this. I'm like,
Yeah, they have right in or right out is what he was, he said.
Don't they have to do that now?
not really.
No, I did some work of the previous owner in that house, and I could back up and then head back up north on Hauser Street.
Right.
But that's what I'm saying, you have to do it now, so that, we're changing the
I
traffic
mean, you
pattern.
have to do it now.
Huh?
You have to back out now, but as far as,
Well, yeah.
It's
Why?
no different if you leave the intersection the way it is, or if you change the traffic pattern.
If you leave those two
Yeah, it would be different.
oblong as flat, then they won't be driving up over any curbs.
Okay,
Yeah.
I understand that.
Well, if it's a 2-inch raise, I don't have an issue with that. But if it's more than that, then there are some vehicles that get really, really close to the ground.
Like a Camaro or a Mustang or
Sure.
something like that, that'll scrape every time.
Mayor, Council, one of the things that we have talked about is, he scrolled it down, but if you look at just the driveway that's above that, yeah, maybe you can get there. And then go a little bit that way on it, because you can see where the person that lives there.
It's driving.
Drive it out.
He's driving
I
through the
noticed that.
grass.
Yeah. I noticed that the other day.
Yes, you can see where they're frustrated with not being able to back out onto that street. So they drive through the grass and they come out on Foley.
Well, the other issue,
So,
they have is that their driveway comes over and does this because of settling.
One of the things that we would, as a city, in the incorporation of this, I mean, remember now, this is all conceptual, and we haven't dived down into the details of this. But in my mind, those two property owners would be offered the ability, as part of this project, you would build in a little we could build a hammerhead turnaround in their driveway so that they never had to back out again, which would be a huge improvement over the existing condition. So I think we can mitigate those two driveways simply just like that.
Well, that one would be easy if they just dumped
But
that on the.
you might be able to just make a loop out of that one.
That
But-
one,
But the
yeah.
other one, you could just add a T-piece and make a hammerhead turnaround so that you could always turn around in your driveway and be coming out instead of backing out.
But the hammerhead and the one across the street down would be in the front yard.
right.
You couldn't go.
Right.
I mean,
But
there's
you
not
could
enough
still,
room
you could
there
still
to
put
the
a
sidewalk.
hammerhead there so that they.
Oh, yeah. No, I understand.
Slow down, slow down.
You could still put a little hammerhead in here so that they could back out and go out. So you
Yeah.
would never have to back out on the street again. I'm done, sorry.
And that's a valid point. You're right in the sense that it would be in the front yard. I'll say this, from a bike trail project we did on a 4-lane street, on a purely volunteer basis, we approached probably a dozen property owners and said, we appreciate that you don't have a very easy time backing out of your driveway now onto a 4-lane street. And by adding a rec trail in your front yard, it's just one more thing that you've got to look for. Would you be interested in that hammerhead? Granted, it's going to occupy a piece of your yard. 100% ended up with that because it is a great solution just to make it you know.
And that's exactly why my driveway at my location is so huge.
Yep.
It's because I don't back out onto Hauser Street. Don't want to.
I thought it was because you had 4 cars.
Would all of the homeowners have that ability around there? Would we incorporate that?
Yeah.
Or would it only be those 2 homeowners that need that?
Those are really the only two, I guess, from experience that are too close or so close to the intersection that they're affected. They are certainly affected today, and that wouldn't change drastically with the roundabout, but once you get further out, even that house.
Is that centerpiece that you have there, so in the current roundabout that we have, has an ability to, I think there's like plants and things we can put in that one. So this one is completely
100% paved.
So there's no, okay.
Yep.
I didn't know if that was just a
And it's
design
not a
that you were
big,
doing.
it doesn't have an 8-inch curb around it like the one.
Well, I think,
down
yeah,
on Cedar.
somebody had wanted to put some sort of pillar or some other things in there at one time, and I just thought, okay, just make sure that that's not.
This would make it so that the buses and whatnot, as they go down Hauser, can just swerve a little bit and mostly just go straight forward.
If we end up, whatever we do at this intersection, are we going to finish the sidewalk that runs there, where it's missing? Separate project. Okay. Soon, though, project to be completed sooner than later. Sure.
So that's a CAN bus in Coralville, full-size bus, bigger than a school bus, and it runs right over that center island when he needs to turn left.
And this is that's the same size of mini roundabout as what you're talking about at this location.
Yep.
So how do you know who has the right of way then, if he's in the middle?
It's a big yield.
Well, I know that part.
So it's no different than a regular roundabout, and that's the beauty of it, is the simplicity where you look left, and if somebody is there, you yield to them.
I mean, if the bus is in the middle.
Well,
Go real slow.
Yeah.
if you're in the roundabout, you have the right of way. What he did was he went to the right, came all the way back around, but because of the length, his back end tracked through it. That's the point of that. So, yeah, he went that like that.
Here, this front came all the way around here. It's just that his tail drags across like that.
Right. So then this car would follow, and watching out for this car, obviously. But that's how it worked.
How long has that roundabout been in place in Coralville?
3 years now, coming up on 3.
Do you have any accidents or any incident reports on that? Or any information that maybe you could get to Brian for us?
We could, and I got him there. The accident history disappeared, at least I think in the first year.
We had the data up to, I think, 2016, and that was in the PowerPoint that I had before, so I can get that back to you. I don't have anything newer than 2016, but I can look.
And I'm sure it may not compare the same exactly, but I just want to know.
Sure.
Because that traffic may be a little bit different than what
Clarity, we're
ours is.
talking about the Coralville, not.
Correct.
not-
Right.
That's all I'm asking is, I want to
Yeah.
know what data is, hey, this is a mini
We'll talk to the
roundabout.
city
They
engineer in
have
Coralville and get that
10,000 vehicles, and now there's, X amount of incidents or whatever it may be as far as that.
Traffic counts are similar at Coralville and here? Or are you
Yeah.
gonna touch on that shortly here?
I don't have Coralville's, but
If
yes,
I recall correctly, two of the directions were about the same. The other two were higher.
yeah, I think overall this has a higher traffic volume, but per leg is probably pretty similar.
What I remember out of that was that the one direction on that roundabout was about equivalent to what the traffic on Hauser is. The other direction was not quite as much, but close to what the traffic
Okay.
volume on Hauser is.
Okay, then the other thought is, it could have the same amount of traffic spread out throughout the day. Our Hauser Fulham is concentrated twice a day.
Yep.
Where it's diddly the rest of the time. Is it going, you base it on that traffic count for those hours?
Yep.
Is it comparable?
So I'll get to the traffic at Fulham and Hauser, because I do have that.
Okay.
And so here's an ideal location regardless of what city you're at, regardless of what intersection we're talking about. Ideally, we're looking for an intersection that has high delays at times, but not high enough that they meet an actual traffic signal warrant. You don't need a light yet, it's not warranted. You need some side street volume, at least 10%. If it's a through street, there's better ways to deal with when all of that traffic is going through. You want less than 1,600 cars per leg per hour, and that goes to your point. When we say 15,000 vehicles per day, that's a conservative number because really what we look at is we want less than 1,600 cars per leg per hour. And that's not, the condition here at Follium and Hauser is not that different than most. Most intersections, most streets have a peak hour, and it's either in the morning or it's in the afternoon. And so we have that in Coralville, we have it here at Follium and Hauser. We also want relatively low speeds, 35 miles an hour or less. That's no problem here. Hauser is 30 mile an hour signed, Follium stop controlled in 25. The only reason why you want that is because you're slowing down. We don't want to go from 55 to 15, and because you do that anywhere and you run the risk of rear-end collisions. So residential areas with low speeds and few trucks are perfect candidates for this. An area with right-of-way constraints where you don't have huge swaths of land to build a larger intersection with turn lanes and signals. And 3-lane approaches, 5-lane approaches, any of those really goofy ones where signals and stop signs get confusing. Roundabouts and mini roundabouts are great for it. So how does this compare? The traffic counts that we used in the application were collected by the DOT in 2014, May 1st, I think. Yeah, May 1st, 2014. So I looked through Google and thankfully they had a great aerial photo from like 2 weeks later. That corresponded to the time where Cedar Street was being reconstructed between Logan and Parham. So Logan was still open, it was not a roundabout yet, but Cedar, all the way through Parham, even the Parham intersection was closed. So I don't know how much that affected traffic through here. I guess I'm gonna assume that there was a marginal increase, but Cedar Street was still open. That's obviously well before Mulberry Street got reconstructed. So not a huge influx here. So those are the numbers that we have today. And the peak hour was the afternoon, school letting out, and we had, I think it was 591 vehicles going through that leg, just under 600. So when we're saying we want, this only works at 1,600 or less. We were at 600. So it meets that criteria. Also the 10%, depending on the hour, it was between 15% and 25% of the traffic running through that roundabout was off of, or coming from Follium. So you hit that as well. Don't do it with high truck turning because they gum up the works. I mean, if you had high trucks running through Follium and Hauser now, that would be a problem. You don't. On that day, May 1st, they had 7 semis over the course of the day. And I'm gonna guess that's pretty typical. Thinking about going to Dollar General or going to Fairway.
When you say over the course of the day, is that over a limit of 24 hours, or was that over a 4-hour period that you did your analysis, or a?
And I didn't do those at all. That's over the DOT's 24-hour count for that, that intersection.
And that could have been buses as well?
Big straight trucks?
Could have been, yep.
Because Crossroads has a big straight truck that they use. So.
We shouldn't have any semis turning there, right? I mean,
Right.
there shouldn't,
Not-
I mean,
not
what's the
very
biggest
often.
truck that we should see turn onto Follium? Okay.
You got somebody moving with
Unless
a full.
somebody's moving.
Sure.
We need to accommodate it because there's always gonna be a moving semi someday, but not every minute.
Right.
Well, Coralville was, you would ask for the Coralville traffic count, is that right?
Yeah, I wanted to know what it was.
13,000 vehicles per day at the Coralville mini roundabout. So.
Okay, and what did we figure for ours?
I think ours was.
It was about 8.
Where's that intermission music?
10,700 current.
Wow,
So a little bit less than Coralville, but
pretty similar though.
We don't want to do it where people are doing U-turns because it's not made for that, neither is the current intersection. One-way and multi-lane, you should be looking at a bigger intersection, period, and vertical curves, if you can't see to the other side of the intersection, don't do a roundabout. Minis have a traffic calming effect, though we don't put a post or a tree in the middle. The mere fact that there's that circle that you need to turn your wheel a little bit slows you down. It's also safer, and we'll show you that in the next slide more in detail. It's more efficient in the sense that not everybody has to stop every time, and quite honestly, most of the time you don't have to stop, so save yourself a few seconds every time for every single car. And it's compact in the sense that we don't have a need for right-of-way acquisition. Here's the benefit, and I know it came up and I know it comes up. Inexperienced drivers, how do they handle a roundabout? I'll say this, first and foremost, they are all learning roundabouts here and essentially anywhere, but thankfully in Muscatine you have one just down the street from the high school, so that's an easy trip to make. So they do know them, but an inexperienced driver is a problem no matter what. And why? Because they don't have the experience, they don't know where to look and how long to look and when to look. So anything we can do to make their job easier makes it safer. In a four-way intersection, there are 32 ways you could cause or be involved in a crash. That's basically 8 from any given direction. Oh, sure. And that's anywhere from rear end, side swipe, T-bone, 32 ways to crash. And so in theory, that's 8 or 32 ways you need to look every time you move through an intersection. And once you've been doing it for 5 or 10 or 15 years, it becomes second nature, and we all get pretty good at it. When you're 3 days out of driver's ed, it's a little bit more overwhelming. So the benefit of a roundabout or a mini roundabout is we drop it to 8. And so from any approach, it's really 2. Look to your left and make sure you're not going to get hit. And look in front of you to your right and make sure you're not going to rear end somebody that just made it through the intersection. That's really what we're looking for is don't get sideswiped, don't get rear-ended, and don't rear-end anybody. So it is a inherently confusing movement if you've never approached a roundabout. I fully appreciate that. And I think there was a pretty good public education component when that Logan and Cedar Street roundabout was installed. Videos and flyers in the city utility bills, all that kind of stuff is important because first time I drove through a roundabout, I didn't know what I was doing either. But it can be distilled pretty simply to look left, and if there's somebody coming, you got to wait for them. Otherwise, it's your turn. So inexperienced young drivers, in the sense that they have a learning curve on any intersection, any traffic pattern, a mini roundabout or a roundabout isn't a bad one to learn on. Get into TSIP logistics, traffic safety improvement program. That's why I'm here. You were, congratulations, awarded a grant for a mini roundabout at Fulham and Hauser. And it honestly came about in a little bit backwards way. We knew Brian from Davenport. We see Brian every once in a while. I like Muscatine and coming back here and eating food. So ran into him at some point and said, hey, there's this TSIP program, and it's relatively easy to apply for. There's not pages and volumes of data that you have to do. There's no money that you have to outlay. But applications are due pretty soon. If you have anything that's obvious, because quite honestly, they're always looking for decent projects. It's traffic safety improvements. So what can we do in an existing street or an intersection to improve it for relatively low cost and good gain? And Fulham and Hauser came up and we took a look at it because it was problematic. And hearing about the backups that happened in recent years, what can you do to reduce a backup? Signalization is certainly an option in terms of reducing backups. Four-way stops, sometimes, maybe depending, but a lot of times they make it worse, and a mini roundabout. So you take a look at those and see real quickly what might work at Fulham and Hauser. And a mini hit all those criteria and fit. So that's what we did without a really detailed traffic analysis, and that's something we can talk about and explain a little bit more. But given the situation now, you've been notified that you've been awarded this. Eventually you'll see paperwork. That money should be available July 1st, 2018, this year, for construction. Typically, you'd have 2 years to spend it, and generally you can ask for an extension if there's a problem. So you do not, as Brian said, have to decide anything today. You're not at risk of losing this anytime soon. That said, you really can't repurpose it the money was granted based on a cost-to-benefit analysis of a mini roundabout. So changing that to a signalized intersection or something different isn't within the confines of this grant. It's not too late, though, to look more in depth if you want a little bit of more explanation. And I'll show you what we did in Coralville, and that's why I'm saying this was a little bit out of step, maybe just because of the timing. Grants or applications are due. Do you want to submit one? What we did in Coralville is you actually take a look, and this is a little gimmicky because it's 3D, but that's just the way the world works anymore with software. What we did for Coralville is we went and got current traffic counts because it was a similar situation that you were dealing with. One leg backs up a lot over an hour a day, and they were getting on the order of 20-some cars lined up at a stop sign. That was an existing four-way stop. And so we take that data and we can put it in the fancy software program and we can mimic it, basically. And then we can say, all right, what happens if you make it a mini roundabout? And that's what you ended up with there. And quite honestly, it's borne fruit. That's really what happens. That massive backup of 20 stopped cars has shrunk to 5 or 6 that are still moving. So that's kind of what we looked at as a model for Fulham and Hauser. Not having traffic counts when Cedar Street, or when Mulberry was under construction. Not having traffic counts when this was in a four-way stop situation. But it's a reasonable expectation that you could get a similar result if we went out and got current traffic counts at Fulham and Hauser tomorrow and ran it through the same process. But quite honestly, more often than not, we probably would have done this first. We would have also gone through signal warrants. There's 8 signal warrants for a traffic light, and that's crash history and pedestrian use and peak volumes. From the traffic counts, at least, I don't think you would hit any of those 8 warrants for that intersection. It's not high volume enough. That aside, it would be a logistic challenge to put a signal in there anyways with those high voltage power lines. You would be moving those lines, and there's not a good spot to move them other than underground. So I would suggest, I guess, if you want more data, that's absolutely fine. Brian, Jim, and others can certainly look into it. But
this step that you talked about right now, where you had the 20 cars backing up, and then you ended up doing the analysis, came back to where you saw 5 cars moving, how difficult would that be for you to be able to do that with Fulham and Hauser now?
Not hard at all. We could either use the data from 2014, or we could go throw a camera system that sits there for a day and records cars itself to get a current today traffic count, and then take a look at those warrants and put this in there. It's relatively quick. Yeah, I guess we would.
I understand. Would that be then a 2-day fee?
I'm sorry?
Would that be a 2-day fee?
What's a 2-day?
Cost? Would you be charging for 2 8-hour days?
In terms of our time?
Yeah.
No, I guess I don't look at it that way. There's a fee for setting up the cameras and getting that data crunched, and then a fee for us sitting and doing those analyses. If you really wanted it modeled, I think you're on the order of $5,000 or $6,000 by the time it's all said and done. It's relatively quick and easy, but it's not instantaneous.
I think the biggest difference I see between the Coralville intersection and the one in the Fulham Hauser intersection is that the Coralville one doesn't impact really anyone's driveways.
Yeah.
Is the biggest difference I see. There's no right in, right out on any of those. They're far enough. They're all far enough back from the intersection that they can just cross. They don't hit those little islands or anything like that. That being said, I understand that it's an issue at this intersection no matter what, whether with the way it is now or with the mini roundabout. It just.
However, I think the comment was that they didn't have to be raised.
Right. No, and I understand that. Yeah.
You could come out of there, or you could shrink the 2 inches versus the 3 inches.
Yeah. Well, the raise it 2 inches with a 1 inch no, 2 inch no, you're going to see where that raised area is. 6 inch, probably not.
Right.
I've had considerable amount of people call in or message me that they wonder why it wouldn't work to just put a no left turn coming off of Fulham onto Hauser during the peak hours, the half hour in the morning and half hour in the afternoon. Could you speak to that option?
If you're on Hauser, you can't turn left because you get if you're on Fulliam, you can't turn left onto Hauser because you'll end up backing up cars.
Right.
And would that also solve the problem?
I don't know if it would solve the problem. It certainly could be looked at as part of that traffic study. There are all sorts of creative ways to deal with it. There's nothing inherently wrong or illegal or against any traffic guidelines that says you can't do it. It's confusing. Anytime you put a temporary restriction on somebody, it's confusing, and I guess you're liable to get people that ignore it or don't understand it or don't do it.
Kind of like the roundabout now.
I don't know that there's a way to ignore that, though.
People stop in the middle of the roundabout and wait for the oncoming traffic to enter the roundabout. I think that's what she meant.
That's what I meant.
Is it? Okay.
Yes.
A little more public education might help that. It's the same thinking behind movable stop signs for schools. The theory is I guess the intent is good. I have one down the street from my house. The problem with them is it's a temporary condition that exists for 7 or 8 hours a day for 8 or 9 months out of the year. I don't consciously know that I've rolled through that stop sign, but I can all but guarantee you I have, because so many hours of the day or so many days of the year, I can.
Right.
So any of those temporary conditions where I have to do something different for an hour or two, it just becomes really hard to, quite honestly, remember, and then it falls to enforcement, where you literally need to station a cruiser out there to enforce it. So I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm not saying it isn't done. There are plenty of those, there are electronic signs that can be remotely controlled. But I would just suggest that becomes a little bit difficult to grasp. In addition, the inconvenience. I mean, those people are there turning left because they want to get left. I'm not
Some of the comments have been that this is, there's only a problem at this intersection for those 2 small windows a day, 5 days a week, not 7, and only 9 months out of the year. And so we're doing a big fix on a very little small problem, time frame of problem. And would it not be easier to just put that sign up and even try it and see does it work or it doesn't work?
If you put a time frame on it, then they're coming up there and they go, okay, now what time is it? Can I? And they're already in the wrong.
I would think the backup of the cars would make them remember, but this is just
just to
comments that I've been getting.
Sure, and just to speak to that briefly, we could do whatever council directs us to do. Like I said, we brought this forward as an opportunity to repair the intersection and create a safe intersection, and we have a funding for it. It's a solution. That's all it is. So whatever you guys decide to do is ultimately what will end up happening.
And I've got to say, I've gone back and forth on this quite a bit, but after going through the budget process and knowing where the budget's at, and knowing that this particular grant gives us the ability to fix the concrete in that area, albeit in a different way, configuration than it is now, that definitely pushes me to consider this more. That being said, I've not had a whole lot of positive feedback about this particular concept. And and I travel a decent amount for my job and see in a number of places that I've been the type of time-based traffic flow changes where I've seen it in Phoenix and Clearwater and different variety of areas, but where you've got much more confusing roads, honestly, that have this lane from 3 to from 2 o'clock to 4:30, such and such direction only, that sort of thing. So there is, I don't see a problem personally with the no left turn from 7:30 to 9 on weekdays and from 2 to 4, you know, that kind of thing. But
I think it's
also looking at replacing that. I mean, like, we still need to fix that road. So the budget is pushing me a different direction than what.
I think it's interesting because I actually discussed it with drivers, bus drivers, school bus drivers, and some of the people that ride the route delivery people, and asked them, what do you think? And all of them said, well, yeah, if you limit it to left turns, whatever. And one guy says, you're probably going to have to assign a law enforcement person to traffic enforce for the first couple of weeks to everybody get it. But it should be fine. The 4-way stop sign, some people would recommend it, but I think I've actually traveled that area and looked at it. I think that would actually stop the flow of traffic on Hauser if we did that.
Yeah.
That's not good. But I think it might be worth considering the limited to left turns. What is the little sign going to cost under $500 to put signs up saying no left turn from these times to this time, or some sort of electronic device? And let's at least take it for a test drive since we do have some time.
Well, and I would add, you know, I came here from Illinois almost 20 years ago, but I have always found it confusing to have a temporary stop sign in front of a school.
Yeah.
Because it not only does it change, but when they drag the sign off to the side, it's still sitting there. I see it out of the corner of my eye, and I'm not sure if I'm supposed to stop or not.
Yeah.
So I don't know that that's clear either. And if you put in a left turn or a no left turn sign, and then you put a cruiser out there, you just, the whole point is to keep traffic moving, and now you're going to have a law enforcement person there stopping people because they turned left. That seems self-defeating as well. I'm just trying to think through it.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm kind of thinking, I think maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't know if maybe you were suggesting that since we have time before we have to spend the money,
right,
that maybe try out the no left turn sign, and that still doesn't answer that we need to address the repairs in that area, and where do we get funding for that if we don't, if we turn down the grant money. But if we were to, in the meantime, not, to put up a sign that says no left turn during, during those hours, that would be something I would be interested in looking at.
I think it's overwhelming, though. I need to say this too. Overwhelming. I've had more people who tell me no roundabout at this intersection. Unbelievable how many people I've never seen before in my life have stopped me in Hy-Vee, Fairway, grocery stores, Walmart, and I'm like, really? And my next question to them is, do you live in that area? 50-50 says yes, 50-50 no. So, and I'm a little confused, but okay. And it's just, I'm not sure if they're just against roundabouts or they legitimately have a stake in saying, because they travel this intersection and they don't want a roundabout there. I don't know what the downside of that either. But I say it's a 50-50, and then we're not talking about 2 or 3 people. We're talking easy 50 or 60 people coasting.
Yeah, and that's been my experience too so far.
Wait. I could even say tonight, while I was at the Grandview thing tonight, I had 3 people tell me that while I was eating a cookie. So I want to make sure.
Yeah, I don't know if the people that don't want them are just more vocal, but certainly the percentage of people that have called me, I've had, on one hand, I could count how many were in favor, and it's well over 100 that aren't. I don't know if they're just more vocal in stating their opinions.
I'd guarantee that.
I mean,
Yes.
for me, the with the traffic science, I mean, it makes sense to me to put it, the actual way that works. I mean, I understand the roundabout, and I don't disqualify that. It's just the public feedback has been exponentially negative on that concept. But we have a lot of things to consider there. So that's why I would like to see maybe a signage test in the meantime. But
I like that too. I like to at least take it for a test drive and see, and can we do it? Because those signs can't cost that much. That says no left turn for a certain amount of time.
One of my concerns, and maybe you can You want to address his thing first?
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to research the sign cost. It would probably be 30 to 60 days to get a sign. It's be a custom-made sign. I don't know that they have the, I mean, with you, with the time on it, we can get an estimate for that or a quote for that. So, I don't know, I can't give you a price right now.
Sure.
And I know there will be some people in the community and in this council chambers that are gonna go totally shocked, but Bill Fitzgerald adamantly said, no way in hell are we gonna have a roundabout at Logan and Cedar. I was adamant against roundabouts. I travel Cedar Street, so I'm really not using much of the roundabout. I don't go on Logan at all. I just don't do it. But the flow through there has been decent. I don't see a major issue with it. This one, as long as we're not causing a problem for the local residents, backing, the ones with driveways nearby. If we were going to require them to be right in or right out, that's an absolute no for me. But what we're doing here, we're coloring concrete, we're raising it a little bit that I can still get my Miata over the top of it. I mean, I got a ground clearance of 4 to 6 inches depending on which vehicle I'm driving. So speed humps bothered me a lot. But this intersection, I know it, during school hours, it has been horrible. I've been backed up on it myself. But I think it's something that we should try. We tried Cedar Street. It appears to be working quite well. I haven't had a semi trying to get through and have to back down during snow event because we still do an excellent job clearing snow. So,
Have you heard from the people?
oh yeah, and I'll have every neighbor over there calling me and telling me what kind of a hammerhead I am.
So are the people primarily saying no to you as well?
Most of them. There are people that have been saying, yeah, we need one there.
But more the other way?
But it's you're hearing from the residents in the area, probably 24 to 30, maybe 50, but that's spreading it out a ways. There's 23,000 people in the city of Muscatine.
And 11,000 across this intersection.
Pardon?
And 11,000 across this intersection per day.
Yeah. And you're not
You
hearing.
have 100, that's not 11,000.
No. So you're hearing from a very vocal minority, in my opinion, and I know it will affect some of the way these people, the neighbors operate, but I think they will get over it.
Just as a follow-up to how we would proceed or how we could proceed here, we haven't made a decision, you haven't made a decision, we haven't asked you for a decision yet. That point will come, however you want to direct us now, but at some point we either have to tell them to proceed with the plans or not. That's not tonight, but just so you know, that would be our next step. If you want us to do something in the meantime, I don't know how that works in depth. If you direct us to do whatever through Greg or just tell me or whatever, we can do whatever council agrees to do. I don't think Greg had anything else to say. I don't know if you have any other questions for him, but I was just, let you know where we are.
My thing at this point is the council as a whole needs to give them direction. And if you have 4 people on council at this point that's in favor of the roundabout, it's done. Roundabouts needs to be planned.
Before we get to that part though, I think the last time we spoke, our question was, can we say no to this part of the grant? Would it negatively affect the Park Avenue part of the grant?
The Park Avenue 4 to 3 lane conversion, 2 totally separate projects. This can go away in a heartbeat.
So if we say no, thank you, but no to this money, it won't affect the other part.
Correct. It won't affect it, but keep in mind they are 2 separate pots of money. So the money associated with this one just completely goes away. It can't be moved over to Park.
Okay, yeah, we
Right.
understand.
We understand
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, we just want to make sure that we understood that they're independent of each other. Okay.
Maybe you could address kind of a thought concern of mine. If you just picture that intersection without that center circle, and no signs, no nothing, it'd be kind of a free-for-all, as far as people coming and going through the intersection.
They yield.
What you probably think there'd be accidents eventually. But now put that center circle in, and you haven't really changed the size of the intersection as such, but you still have no traffic control devices, aren't you still almost at a free-for-all? The most aggressive driver is going to go through that, come hell or high water.
You'll have the same traffic control that you would at a four-way stop. It's a four-way yield. There is a legitimate yield sign at the entry to each point. So to the extent that people respect a stop sign or a yield sign today, it's really the same traffic control condition. Plus, you have that visual cue of that middle island.
The problem I have with the one on Cedar Street, and this might be even worse, is if I'm approaching the roundabout, let's see. I guess this one doesn't show it very well, but if I'm approaching the roundabout and there's a car just entering the roundabout coming toward me, I really can't decide whether I should enter the roundabout until he makes his move to exit the roundabout. I had a car, I was going toward town on Cedar Street, and he was coming away from town, and he got into the roundabout before I did. And I didn't know if he was going to go straight through up toward the high school or he was going to come around and go on Logan. I made the wrong assumption. I figured he's going to go straight through. He wasn't signaling or anything. And I started to pull out in front of him. And he was going on
the Logan.
On the Logan.
Yeah, that's how they worked.
But he was in the roundabout.
He was in the roundabout.
So you have to yield.
He has the right of way.
Yes, I had the yield.
Yeah.
But that's, compared to this one, Cedar's big.
Yes.
Compared to
You're
this
not
one.
gonna have much time to make a
You have
decision.
much, my concern with this small one is you're in and out of the roundabout so quick, you have to make a quick decision. If there's someone in the roundabout, no matter where they're going, because you don't know, you better stop.
It's a fair point that if you see a car in a roundabout, mini or full roundabout, and you're not sure if where they're going and whether or not they'll get to where you are before you get out of there,
Stop.
It's your job to yield. The benefit of a mini roundabout in this particular instance versus the current condition where Fulham is at stop, but Hauser has full reign. The people on Fulham that are trying to make those left turns today are making that decision with 30-mile-an-hour plus traffic at risk of T-boning them.
That's
So
another,
the
I think
condition
to
with
be effective, we're gonna have to slow the traffic.
That's what it's designed to do.
That's why it's a yield.
But I've gone through that Cedar Street roundabout too fast many times because you're going up at 35 miles an hour and then you're at the roundabout and I admit it, I start entering that roundabout at 35 miles an hour, which is way too fast. And then there's nothing to slow me down except common sense, if you will.
Well, and,
You know,
and there are, and I don't have any history with the design of the Cedar and Logan. I'm sure it's perfectly fine. I didn't do it. I'm not critiquing it. One of the keys for a full-size roundabout in that situation is as you approach it, you really need to be physically deflected. And I know that it exists there, but the extent to which you are physically deflected forces you to slow down. So there's a right deflection or enough deflection where if it's intended to physically prevent you from entering the roundabout at too quick of a speed. But here, quite honestly, you are reliant on traffic control. You are reliant on 4 yield signs, just like you are 4 stop signs at a 4-way stop. And if people choose to ignore that, there's quite honestly nothing I can do from a traffic standpoint to get them to do it. That truly is an enforcement. But it's not uncontrolled. It's just yield signs, not stop signs.
Cedar and Logan was reviewed by IDOT's contractor, which is based out of Wisconsin. I can't remember the name of the firm that does it, the contract roundabout review for them. But
Then you just have too fun of a car.
One other comment.
It's an SUV.
One other comment that people have brought up that I just wanted to share was because it's such a small area, and you really once somebody's on, they're on, like you said. If you had a long line of cars getting on and they were following one another bumper to bumper, they could theoretically pinch this other street off and they wouldn't get on, which is what we have now.
Well, but that's why we go to, you need side road traffic. You don't want all of that traffic only on Hauser, because that will happen. And short of standing there, or short of getting the really detailed analysis of we literally have a camera sitting there. The DOT doesn't necessarily have the cameras. I can't assure you that that can't happen or doesn't happen here, but more often than not, you get that platooning because of stop signs, where every car is stacked next to each other. With 25% of the traffic during the peak hours coming from the side road, I think it's more intermittent, more sporadic, maybe than people would be afraid
During
of.
those peak hours, though, it really is solid.
Yeah.
And I could see this side or this side getting a line going through and pinching off the other side, and now you still have a backup.
But when you have, on the intersection, if you have a car that's wanting to go south, and they're coming around it, they're in the roundabout, blocking traffic in that one lane.
Yeah.
The other people are not supposed to continue through. They're supposed to yield to the person in the roundabout, and so at that point, occasionally we have the police officer set out there and write some citations for stupidity.
It's not like the police are busy.
No, I know. But it'd be better than sitting at that intersection now doing it.
Well, I don't think they would be doing anything wrong. It's such a small circle that if you got one car in there and another car pinched right up behind him, then one car is on the roundabout and they're legally on there, and everybody else is supposed to stop. The other cars can just keep following him, and no one else can get on, and
It's
nobody would be
not
doing
when-
anything
Not
wrong.
when someone's on the roundabout.
Yeah,
There may be two right next to each other, but that third one back behind, he should be stopping and allowing that person to round the corner. I'd like to know, and the conversation is wonderful, but are there 4 votes on council as far as a consensus?
I would feel better about voting for it if I knew that the property owners most affected by this were on board and wouldn't be negatively affected as far as property values with this roundabout.
The one house is for sale now.
There's 2 of them for
There's
sale.
both of them too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're across the street from one another.
Okay.
I don't know that we have enough data, or there is enough data to determine whether or not a roundabout near you affects your property value. It's something that I asked Craig about, and I don't think you were able to find anything, were you? So I can't speak to that. I mean, we could talk to them or talk to whoever you want. I'm assuming they would say they don't want it, but maybe they would be for it. I guess it would be nice to have direction one way or the other tonight, whether it's the signs or the roundabout or whatever. I'll leave that to you guys to decide how you want to do that, but that's all I want to say about that piece right there.
I got a question too, where our engineer said possibly putting in a
The
hammerhead on there.
hammerhead, if we offered the hammerhead.
Yeah,
That
but
would
the
certainly
other
make
side,
sense.
my next question is, all right, if we add that, that's adding to the cost of this, where's that money coming from?
The project,
What project?
this one. I mean, it's
It would,
adding a
it would be,
Certain
it
amount
would
of
be either, it'd have to come out of road use probably, so we would lose it from somewhere else doing another project. We don't have, it's not budgeted in the grant. We could add to the grant cost, but the state would not pay for that.
But the
Right.
cost to have the contractor that's doing the roundabout
Would be much less.
pop in there and do it.
Probably $5,000 or something. Not a lot of money. No.
Absolutely
Mayor,
minimal.
Council, I got a couple things that I just got to get off my chest, or to at least answer. I understand the concept about the signage and to do something. As a engineer, as a city engineer, I want to caution you, A, how you talk about it, and B, if we do that, how we implement it. You want to talk about opening yourself up to a liability that you don't really want to open yourself up to. Just call it an experiment. We're going to try this for a while. And imagine if an accident happens, how that plays in court.
Well, I think
You
we said
really
that
need
about-
to be careful how you talk about it. I'm not saying right now or anything,
Yeah.
but if we do that, you don't want to call it a trial. You don't want to call it an experiment. Honestly, I can't come up with what the word is, but you understand the point I'm trying to get at, okay? The second thing is, I was so intent on getting that one out. I've forgotten what the second thing is. The second thing was really important.
Losing hair too, Jim.
What's that? Oh, yeah, and I'm getting older. There's no question about that. I can't get it. I'm just getting in there. The
Did it have to
temporary.
do with the traffic coming off of Folium? 'Cause
Oh, yes, the mayor's concept about that once the traffic starts to establish on a heavy leg. To me, the great thing about a roundabout, because honestly, I would have bet money that that's what would have happened at Cedar and Logan. Cedar was the dominant traffic count by far, but roundabouts are self-regulating. So as this traffic that's the dominant direction goes around that roundabout, every so often, there's one of these that does a left turn, and it creates a gap in this traffic, and then these guys get out. And then it reestablishes, and then every once in a while, this one turns left, and it creates that gap in the traffic, and then these cars can get out. So it's self-regulating to the point where, like he said, as long as you have traffic volumes on those side streets that are certain volumes, it just tends to self-regulate itself. It really does create those gaps in the traffic.
Sure.
I'm done.
I like roundabouts myself. I wouldn't mind if they were everywhere. But I feel the need to share what the citizens say to me and what their concerns are, and I need to get that point across because it's not what I want. It's what the community wants, and it'll be up to the council to decide.
So do we have consensus to do the roundabout?
I'm against roundabouts, but I'd say let's proceed under the proviso that we offer the property owners the hammerhead.
And meet with them is to get them on board with what's happening.
Raise of hands of those that are
Absolutely,
willing to do it, as long as we give the hammerhead a try.
With the hammerhead
With the hammerhead.
Make the offer.
stipulation.
It's free money.
That was 4.
So we have
Well,
five people.
we pay it
Santos
with our state.
didn't raise his hand.
It's not free.
What's that?
Being a rebel.
What, I said I was good with it, I said.
Well, you didn't raise your hand.
So if I,
I already know that.
It'd be nothing cost.
so from what I'm understanding from what just happened here is what I will do is I will take the initiative to contact the two property owners that would be affected, see if they'd be interested in doing the hammerhead, yes or no. And then bring back at next council meeting a resolution for you to vote on. Do we need that still? Or I'm not sure what the procedure is for that.
Okay, and I thought it was
Council
3.
would have to authorize a contract.
Correct, yes.
I've had her anyways. Now, I'm just gonna make one quick clarification. If they don't want a hammerhead, but they're still okay with a 2-inch curve.
Correct.
Or the roundabout, it's really talking to those two property owners.
Sure, we'll definitely reach out to them.
And a 2-inch curb is it?
Or none.
Or not, or
We haven't gone
at
through
max?
final design yet.
Yeah.
We haven't done any design yet. I mean, this is all concept. This may change a little bit, so.
Don't give them the impression that if they don't want the hammerhead, they're gonna kill it.
Okay,
Because
well, maybe they're watching on TV
Well,
tonight, they'll
yeah,
know that too,
I'm
so,
sure
but, yeah.
they are.
Okay. So I have some work to do before next meeting. Actually, we have time to as well. It may take us a little bit longer to get a contract back from them, but it'll be coming forward at a future meeting then for you to officially vote on to accept or to enter a contract with them to design it. At that point, that kicks everything going, so.
And if they would like to try to back out in an intersection during school hours, I would welcome them to come to my house at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I will allow them to do a hammerhead and then try to back out, and I'll guarantee that the hammerhead would be a much better out.
Did you have anything else? That's all we
Thank you
have then,
both.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
You wanna give me a hammerhead too? I mean, them,
I'd love to give you a hammerhead. You opened yourself up for that one.
Well, that was the crux of tonight's agenda. We have councilman comments. Councilman Spread, did you have anything tonight?
Only to add, I didn't weigh in earlier, my experience with the roundabout has been favorable at Cedar and Folium, Cedar and Logan. I'm apparently the only one, but the most of the feedback I have is roundabouts work, do it. So.
Councilman Harvey?
I had and I don't know who to ask, so I'm just gonna kind of present it to Greg and maybe Brian. Had a constituent, I can say, that lives north of the foot of the bridge up in, you know, along the riverfront, and they're having a problem right now, or a complaint, if you will, that trucks coming from Illinois are exhaust braking as they come off the bridge to the traffic light. And as you know, exhaust brakes are really, really, really loud. Now, I don't know if there's I know on University, there's a sign that says no exhaust braking, et cetera. I don't know if there's something at that bridge that says that, and could you even put a sign like that on the bridge, since I don't know who the bridge belongs to, you know?
I've had that call
It
too,
belongs to the state. But anyway,
people that live there.
is there, can we at least look at it to see if we can minimize the exhaust braking of the semis?
Certainly look at signage, and we can certainly talk to DOT and Jeff, probably Jeff Armstrong real quick, but we can also.
She mentioned
I think
that,
Phil-
obviously,
Phil hears you as well. I mean, it's also an enforcement issue.
it tends to be periodic a lot of times
Did they-
because of the grain trucks. You know, they get a lot of grain trucks certain times of the year, and blah, 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 you know, as they're coming off the bridge. Blah, blah.
We need a quiet zone. I want to record that.
That's what I wanted to do.
Well, that's true.
Recorded, that's right.
Did you
Anyway,
have?
that's all
make
my
a
only
video of
comment
that.
is, can we look into it?
Yeah, and if they can narrow down the time frame, that'd be great. But if not, we'll look at it.
I think it's more not time of day so much as time of year. And of course, eventually there's always a semi coming across, you know, any time of the year, and if they exhaust brake, it's
Jake,
bad.
Jake break.
Jake, yeah, that's right.
Well, that's what she called it, Jake brake.
Jake
and I
brake.
call- But I think the signs a lot of times say
Engine brake.
exhaust
Your
brakes.
ordinance
Engine
can't say
braking.
Jake brake, since that's a
Probably not.
proper noun.
Says engine braking, no engine braking.
Yeah,
braking.
thank you.
Particular company.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councilman Malcolm, did you have anything tonight?
I just have a question for the administration. I submitted something about traffic, crosswalk, Third, and Chestnut, and it was supposed to be going to committee. Has the committee met? Do I get a discussion about that? Where are we?
Traffic Committee meets every other Wednesday. I did not get that one. We met this yesterday. I did not have that on the agenda. I didn't know about that one. So we can add it to our next meeting and discuss it at that point. I didn't get it till then.
Well, we're gonna talk to the fearless leader who was supposed to forward this on for me.
Okay.
I think we did. What was,
Third and Chestnut, right across the street from the Clark House. Very problematic, especially for the folks in wheelchairs and walkers.
It's a crosswalk then, is that the request?
Crosswalk with the light where you can push the button and people have to stop to let the people in the wheelchairs across the street, please.
Where at on the block, at the corner or in the mid-block or what?
Oh, right there on the corner, there is a public parking lot on one side of the street. We'd like the crosswalk for them to be able to come out of their parking lot and come across the street to the Clark House.
Are you talking mid-block or at the corner?
That's right there at the corner.
Okay.
Okay, I will send myself an email and I'll get that on the next agenda and we'll have an answer for you.
Please.
Thank you. Anything else, Councilman?
No, that's it, thank you.
Councilman Brackett?
Nothing tonight, Your Honor. Thank you.
Councilman Salcedo?
Just a reminder that we're under a snow emergency. There's a lot of snow coming, and hopefully make sure that we hopefully not get it, but just a reminder of the parking, and there's a lot of snow plows will be out, and be careful. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Thank you. Councilwoman Brackett?
Thank you, Your Honor. To go along with Santos, with the snow coming, if you don't have to go out, don't. Stay home.
Point out that you're gonna ride on the snowplow. We wanted to see
Yes.
she's going for a ride on the snowplows.
Councilman Fitzgerald?
Traffic Committee met. Did you discuss Leroy? And if you want to send me a response of what you did, that's
We did discuss Leroy. We will have a council recommendation coming forward next meeting, so yes.
Thank you. That's all.
Staff? Anything?
we're gonna try something a little bit different, or Brian and the company are gonna try something a little bit different with the snow this weekend. The actual snow emergency kicks in Saturday morning, right? And so they'll be out doing at least one pass on Friday through neighborhoods, but then that'll give folks an opportunity to make sure they're properly parked on Saturday and Sunday, to allow them to get through and hopefully get through those neighborhoods quicker than previous before. So trying just a little bit of a tweak on the process, and they'll be able to evaluate whether or not it worked. So we don't always have that opportunity based on the snowstorm, but we'll give it a shot.
Just to add to that, Greg touched on it at the end, it's basically based on a snowstorm like we're expecting, where it's an all-day-long event with heavy snow, rather than trying to do all the emergency routes and keep them open and not getting into the residential routes. We have the ability we have enough vehicles, we're getting drivers from other departments within Public Works to drive them and try to keep the residential open during the day only. And we should hopefully be caught up by nighttime to get back on in those residential routes. So hopefully we'll see an improvement. Try to get everybody's residential street plowed through at least one time and then salted back. So hopefully you'll see an improvement with that.
Good.
I just had a couple of announcements. Republic had a truck breakdown, and they're who we use for our recycle pickup. And so there will be no recycle tomorrow, and Saturday they will be picking up part of Thursdays, whatever didn't get picked up, and all of Fridays on Saturday. The next Coffee with the Mayor is February 24th at 9 a.m. at Happy Joe's. Love to have everyone come. And the last thing that I just wanted to share, and Brian and I talked about it just a bit beforehand, was I've had a lot of customers or a lot of citizens comment about the problem downtown with the snow being heaped up between the streets and the sidewalk, and once they park their car, they can't get around to the sidewalk without walking in the street.
Yes, and we realize that's an issue. The reason that it's done that way, that we don't plow it up all the way up on the sidewalk, is because for our downtown removal, they have to now work in between the parking meters and everything else, so it takes more time. So it's a catch-22, if you will. It's easier for them to come along with the machine and pick it up when it's that far out into the street, as opposed to having to peel it all back and then pick it up. So we can do it either way. It costs more money to do it, or it's quicker and easier to do it if that little bit of a windrow is there. So that's the reason. If we'd like to change it, we can certainly do that. But that's the reason it's been done like that, and it's happened that way in the past. I'm open to suggestions or changes.
I know, like today, I was down at MCSA for a meeting, and the snow was heaped, clear
Right.
up. And so there's people with canes walking
Sure.
in the street
Yeah.
to try to get to the corner, and then even when they get to the corner, they can't get up because the snow is heaped there, because after it was shoveled, then the plows came through, and so there's this huge barrier that you can't get over.
You're right. It's that delay between when we plow the street clear and when we come down and pick up the downtown snow. That's what we're experiencing. And so we only pick up the downtown snow at night because that's when there's less vehicles parked on the street. So that gap, which we're having now, like I parked across the street and I had to do the same thing, cross over that mound to get here. That's what you're seeing, that lag in response time. So I don't have a good solution to that. It's just we can try to plow it up onto the sidewalk, but then you still have that mound on the
Still can't
sidewalk to
get
get
over
over.
it.
Correct.
Right.
So there's no good way to do it.
The mound would still be there.
Yes, it would be. It would just be on the sidewalk instead, and it'd make it difficult for the contractor to get it out of there. It's one of those things with snow that you have to put up with this time of year.
Sure.
So. hope that
All right.
helps.
All right. Hearing nothing else, do I have a motion to adjourn? So moved. Thank you. We're adjourned.
And no hammer.
Hey, don't have that problem in Brazil.
Probably not.